You are not falling behind because you're not smart enough. You are falling behind because you think you are smarter than everyone else. And that belief might already be destroying you. Sometimes a person quietly prepares their own downfall, and more often than not, they do it while trusting their own mind. But here's the unsettling question. Do people really make mistakes because they lack intelligence, or do they fall into traps set by their own brilliance? What if the real danger isn't ignorance, but excessive consciousness? Perhaps some men destroy themselves not out of weakness, but because they think too much. Not because they are incapable, but because they are hyper-aware. Think of the young man at the center of crime and punishment. Poor, proud, withdrawn, yet far from ordinary. He believes his mind sets him apart. He refuses to blend into the crowd. He convinces himself that the rules meant for ordinary people may not apply to those who are somehow superior. And that is exactly where everything begins. A thought appears first as a simple idea. Then it turns into belief. Then justification. And finally, action. What Raskolnikov commits is not just murder, it is an experiment. A test of himself. If I am truly different, I must prove it, he tells himself. That quiet sentence echoes far beyond the novel. I am not ordinary. I deserve more. This world doesn't understand me. At first, these thoughts seem harmless. They may even feel empowering. But slowly, almost invisibly, they create distance. A subtle coldness. A separation from others. People often explain the self-destruction of intelligent men as arrogance. But it is not merely pride. It is over-analysis. Endless reflection. Taking every emotion apart piece by piece. Even dissecting love. Even turning pain into theory. After a while, thinking replaces living. And when thought takes the place of action, life begins to feel empty and colorless. This is exactly what happens to Raskolnikov. In the moment he commits the crime, he may appear physically free, but mentally he is already imprisoned. Because for an intelligent person, the real courtroom is not outside, it is within. Conscience becomes an unrelenting voice. No matter how certain you are of your logic, that voice whispers when you lie awake at night, are you truly superior, or are you simply afraid? Here lies an uncomfortable truth. Some men become destructive not because they crave power, but because they fear weakness. Intelligence becomes their refuge. They dismiss compassion as fragility. They label empathy as something reserved for lesser minds. They believe they are protecting themselves. Yet beneath that intellectual armor lives a suppressed vulnerability. And whatever is suppressed always returns, stronger than before. Dostoyevsky reveals a profound contradiction in human nature. We want to be both judge and forgiven, both godlike and innocent. While placing himself above ordinary people, Raskolnikov secretly longs to be accepted. The claim of superiority often hides a deep sense of inadequacy. Perhaps you recognize this feeling. The sense of strength that comes from distancing yourself. The quiet thought, they don't understand me. Choosing solitude over connection. But eventually, solitude stops feeling like freedom and begins to feel like isolation. And that is where tragedy truly begins. The walls built for protection slowly turn into prisons. Psychologically, excessive rationalization is a defense mechanism. People try to control pain by analyzing it instead of feeling it. But buried guilt, shame, and fear accumulate beneath the surface. The mind invents new explanations to silence them. I was right. I had no choice. It was necessary. Yet conscience does not respond to arguments. It does not calculate. It simply feels. Raskolnikov's true collapse is not the moment he is caught. It is the moments when he almost confesses. because deceiving yourself is far more difficult than deceiving others. No matter how sharp your intellect may be, when you are alone with your own darkness, there is nowhere to hide. Intelligent men often unravel not because of an external catastrophe, but because of an internal war. They lose to themselves. There is another paradox here. Intelligent men crave freedom, but they misunderstand it. Freedom is not the absence of rules. It is the courage to accept consequences. At first, Raskolnikov believes he stands above the law. But genuine freedom begins when he acknowledges his guilt. In that moment, he stops trying to be godlike and chooses to be human. Perhaps the greatest fear of the intelligent is ordinariness. Yet what they dismiss as ordinary is simply humanity itself, making mistakes, feeling remorse, longing for forgiveness, wanting love. Intelligence does not erase these needs, it only complicates them. So consider this carefully. If you constantly separate yourself from others, are you truly superior, or are you shielding yourself from pain? If it feels like no one understands you, are you truly misunderstood, or are you afraid of being seen? Because to be understood is to be vulnerable, and vulnerability means surrendering control. Raskolnikov's story is not merely about crime. It is about the mind collapsing inward. When someone falls in love with their own ideas, they stop hearing any other voice. At that point, intelligence ceases to illuminate and begins to blind. The person analyzes everything, yet cannot see themselves. The philosophical heart of crime and punishment rests on the fragility of the superior man theory. The belief that certain individuals have the right to reshape history appears powerful, almost seductive. For a mind terrified of being ordinary, it offers escape. If some people are truly extraordinary, then their actions are not crimes, but necessities. Yet the novel strikes its deepest blow here. The moment you place yourself above moral law, you fall beneath your own conscience. Dostoyevsky poses a timeless question. Is morality merely a social construct, or is it embedded within the human soul? If morality is just a rule, it can be broken. But if it is woven into our nature, violating it means tearing yourself apart. That is why this story feels less like a detective tale and more like an experiment in consciousness. No matter how rational someone may be, can they silence compassion entirely? Does the pursuit of greatness truly expand the self, or does it shrink the heart? One of Raskolnikov's most fragile moments is also his most human. Not immediately after the murder, but later, when he wanders the streets aimlessly, burning with fever, lost in delirium. The theory of the superior man still exists in his mind, yet his body trembles and his thoughts scatter. The connection between idea and action begins to fracture. He planned the crime like a mathematical equation. Eliminate one harmful life, use the money for good, serve humanity. But the human soul does not obey mathematics. When the unexpected happens, when Lizaveta enters the room, his cold experiment shatters. Reality refuses to follow theory. Life cannot be calculated. And for the person obsessed with control, that unpredictability is terrifying. The more he denies his guilt, the louder his body protests. His fever, his confusion, his restlessness, these are his conscience speaking through flesh. His encounters with Sonia intensify this struggle. Despite her poverty and suffering, she preserves her compassion and faith. She does not theorize, she feels. She does not argue, she endures. In her presence, Raskolnikov's elaborate justifications begin to crumble. He compares himself to figures like Napoleon, yet before Sonia he is disarmed, almost childlike. When he confesses to her, he allows himself to be seen. That confession is not immediate redemption, it is the collapse of pride. The collapse of I am different. What ultimately destroys him is not only the crime, but the exhausting effort to defend it. The endless need to prove he is extraordinary. Because if he is merely an ordinary criminal, then his entire intellectual structure collapses. And so he resists. He denies. Yet the human soul longs for relief more than for victory. In Siberia, though physically imprisoned, he begins, slowly, to change. Sonya's quiet loyalty proves stronger than his philosophy. Gradually he understands something profound. Being human is heavier than being superior, but it is real. It is honest. The self-destruction of intelligent men rarely happens in a dramatic explosion. It unfolds quietly. Relationships grow distant. Emotions are minimized. Even success feels hollow. Because the conflict is no longer external. It is the emptiness within. An emptiness that keeps asking, who am I really? And sometimes, the most dangerous truth is this: pain becomes part of identity. Loneliness turns into a badge of honor. Saying I am alone feels like proof of difference. But that badge does not liberate, it weighs down. If any of this feels familiar, resist the urge to deny it. People often hide most deeply in what they reject. And intelligence can make denial even more sophisticated. In Notes from Underground, the narrator suggests that excessive consciousness leads to paralysis. A highly conscious person becomes incapable of action. Seeing every possibility prevents any movement. The fear of making mistakes leads to inaction. Life slips away. Frustration grows. The world is blamed. Yet often, the battle is internal. People collapse under the weight of their own expectations. If they fail to embody the role they have assigned themselves, they either diminish others or diminish themselves. Either way, the result is the same: inner ruin. Raskolnikov eventually makes a choice. He accepts guilt. This does not bring instant happiness, but it reconnects him to reality. And perhaps that is where true redemption begins for the intelligent mind. Not in being right, not in being superior, but in accepting humanity. Because when the idea I am different crumbles, something remains. Perhaps an ordinary life, or perhaps a real one. So now, let me leave you with this. If you set aside your theories, your claims of superiority, your distance, who remains? A strong individual? Or a frightened child afraid of being hurt? Don't answer too quickly. Let the question linger. Because sometimes what destroys a person is not their mistakes, but the stories they tell themselves to avoid facing the truth. And the most unsettling question of all may be this: are you truly the master of your thoughts, or are they slowly consuming you?